Mr. Speaker, during the estimates process of 2016 and in a non-partisan way, I brought forward questions to the Minister of Families and Children regarding changes to the Family Services Act directed at support for families in kinship relationships. The Minister of the day, the member from Moncton South, told us that further amendments were being worked on, but it would be coming forward very soon and indicated it would be before the end of that year. Can the Premier tell us why we should have confidence in him when his government couldn't prioritize a policy that helps children and everyday New Brunswickers? They never did it, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Again, the safety and the security of our children in this province are our utmost priority. And I want to thank the 1,600 or so social development workers who continue to work for our people in our province, especially our children and our most vulnerable. Even though the legislation has not come to forthwith in the legislature this past year, Mr. Speaker, but we continue to do those items. We want to ensure that children stay in their community. We want to ensure that children who cannot live with their parents for unsecure reasons remain within the family. And we will continue to work on that, Mr. Speaker. We are ready to go with it. Once we get this legislation going, we want to ensure that the legislation comes forward with kinship, but we can rest assured that this is happening right now, Mr. Speaker. We want to make sure that the children in the community stay in the communities and with family members.
The member from St. John Lancaster.
Mr. Speaker, during the estimates process a year later in 2017, I asked questions of the Minister of the Day for Families and Children, the current Minister and member from Fredericton North, almost exactly the same questions I had in 2016. He responded, word for word, the same response as the former Minister. He even, though, went a step further by saying to the media that the amendment would be in place in very short order, not months, Mr. Speaker, but in very short weeks. Unfortunately, that didn't happen either. Can the Premier tell us why we should have confidence in him when he could not prioritize our most vulnerable families?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I can rest assured that people of this province that the kinship model is taking effect right now as we speak. Even though it's not legislated, we are doing it. And I want to thank, again, the people of social development for making sure this happens. For those who don't know what the kinship program is, it's about children who cannot live with their families due to unsecure issues, that they remain within their community and then, more importantly, remain within their families. Mr. Speaker, it is taking place right now, and we will continue to work with those vulnerable people to make sure that the children are safe and secure. Thank you.
The member from St. John Lancaster.
Mr. Speaker, this government has had an opportunity to be collaborative. In fact, I would go so far as to say that the election of 2014 gave him an opportunity to understand that the electorate was fragile. They formed government by less than 300 votes over 4 ridings. But, Mr. Speaker, they chose to ignore legislation that meant something to many people. Legislation I drew to their attention in a nonpartisan way. I went out of my way, Mr. Speaker, for it to be nonpartisan so they would take it seriously. They all but ignored it. How can we have confidence in this future government will be collaborative and nonpartisan going forward? Because they've sure showed, Mr. Speaker, in the past that they're not interested in input from other parties.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's unfortunate what we're hearing from the members of the opposition. We have taken those into consideration. As a matter of fact, Mr. Speaker, they are taking place right now, and I don't know how many times we have to say that. The kinship program is happening as we speak today, and they always have been. So, Mr. Speaker, when this legislation gets underway, we'll make sure that it becomes legislation. Mr. Speaker is talking about collaboration. That's what we want to do. As a matter of fact, we are taking action. That's why we hired Mr. Savory from Nova Scotia to look at all our policies with regards to the safety of the children in this province. Mr. Speaker, the throne speech will mention it. We want to make sure that our most vulnerable are looked after, and that includes the children of this province.